even higher resolution and more photorealistic images, quick animations, and then video clips, whole movies even, this general AI goal that we're working towards.
AI has no soul.
We are hurtling towards a world where art transcends the boundaries of human capability, where creativity merges with technology in ways never seen before in human history.
The problem is, who owns those images that it learns from?
They are going to make you comfortable with artistic cannibalism on a scale unheard of.
This is the realm of artificial intelligence in art, but is it a realm of endless possibilities or ethical pitfalls?
Every single time an artist speaks out about this issue, I see the same tired, overused counterpoints.
These AI companies will try to cast us as whiny and ungrateful.
All while stealing the work of real people to do it.
Today, we're going to dive deep into this compelling debate, challenging the norms and exploring the future of artistic expression.
But it's not the end product that transforms the artist. It's the act of doing it.
It felt like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy.
AI is capable of directly stealing art, not just stealing an artist's style and potential clients.
And in this video, I want to make a good faith attempt to make the case that using AI in the creation of art can actually be a good thing.
The bigger issue is that corporations, like always, will be taking advantage of this technology.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull this one off, but buckle up, I'm going to give it a shot.
I have a very bad feeling about this.
If it wasn't for the Sunday comics, I would have never ever learned how to draw. You see, we didn't get the daily paper in my household growing up as a kid, but every Sunday my parents would get the Sunday paper, and I would always immediately grab the Sunday comics section, and I loved reading those Sunday comics. Those Sunday comics taught me how to draw. You see, I would take the comic, and in particularly Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes were like my two favorite, but I also was like into Peanuts and other things like that. I didn't like any of the old man comic strips like Andy Cap or Hagar the Horrible, but I would take the comic strips that I would like and I'd put them up on the window, and I'd take a piece of paper and put it on top of the comic strip and I would trace it. You know, it all started with me like just tracing the comics, and I'd leave the word bubbles blank and I'd like put my own words in, and I did that over and over again. And eventually I got good enough that I could draw the characters myself, like I could draw Calvin or I could draw Hobbes. And so I would start making up my own comics, which was really important for a kid like me because I was always the type who struggled with like the how to draw books where they tell you to like draw a circle and then a triangle and eventually you'd somehow have a cat. That sort of instruction never worked for me. But tracing and copying and doing it again and again over and over, I don't know what it is, but it like created the muscle memory for me that I could just like pick up the pencil and start drawing my own comics. And you know, with time and as I got older, eventually I started creating my own characters and I started to develop my own drawing style that melded a lot of the things that influenced me together. But if it wasn't for that tracing and if it wasn't for that copying, I would have never learned to draw.
So basically, you just traced.
Add depth and shading to give the image more definition.
Now, when a lot of folks complain about artificial intelligence being used to create artwork and images,
that's tracing.
A lot of this criticism rests in this idea that the AI models are training on millions of images created by other people, and so they're essentially copying the work from others.
What do you call it?
I don't know, man. Tracing?
But if you actually look at how kind of these AI models are taking and interpreting that data and then using that to output out to create new content, I actually see a lot of parallels to my own path on learning how to draw.
Trace of chocolate around your dead body, you.
So much of what we as humans do creatively is about sitting on the shoulders of giants, where we're inspired by others and we take that inspiration from others and we morph and mutate it and make it our own.
There's a right way to steal and there's a wrong way to steal.
When an AI creates a piece of art, it doesn't generate that content out of thin air. Instead, there needs to be an input in order for there to be an output.
The easiest way to not be an imitator really is to not just steal from one person, but to steal from a dozen.
Images and text descriptions are taken from the internet through a practice called data mining, which allows these companies to accumulate an incomprehensible amount of data.
Well, the way you find your voice is that you imitate about a dozen voices. and then something comes out of that that's uniquely your own.
And these corporations have intentionally targeted legal loopholes to allow them to do this.
You will find underpaid, exploited, ripped off humans making the system work.
He means they're thieving bastards.
While this might not be the only debate about AI-generated art, this debate right here is the core debate to be having when it comes to the ethics of using artificial intelligence in generating art right now. I don't think anybody out there is going to debate that me as a 6-year-old kid taking Bill Watterson comics and tracing them without Bill Watterson's permission so that I could learn how to draw would ever be mistaken for stealing. And for centuries, heck, millennia, humans have been looking at the art of other humans and letting that artwork influence what they do. That's just how it has always been. When machines gain the ability to do the same thing, is that considered stealing? Or is that just simply observing and learning the world that they're in? If an AI image generation model like Stable Diffusion looks at a picture and uses that picture to figure out, hey, that's what a dog looks like, is that actually a copyright violation? Is doing that without permission theft? Or is that just simply looking at the world around us and observing and learning? Again, there is zero debate about whether or not that behavior is okay for a person. The question becomes, is that okay for a machine to do?
Well, that's a matter of opinion.
I personally tend to lean towards the side that doesn't believe it's stealing and doesn't believe it's a violation of copyright and doesn't believe it's intellectual property theft. But I can easily understand and empathize with the other side of the debate.
There aren't exactly books that instruct you on how to steal art.
You know, when I went to college, I went as an animation major. And so I was studying film and animation in college at an art school. And this was back in the late 90s. It was the time when the transition was starting to happen between traditional filmmaking creation to digital video creation. Videos at the time were initially edited where you had like multiple tape decks and you would like, you know, shuttle and jog between those two tape decks and you'd like record to a new tape. And that was how you actually edited a video. Film was actually not all that different, where you know, we would have, 16 millimeter film that would be shot on a camera like a Bolex or an Arri or something like that. We'd send it off to get processed. It would cost an ungodly amount of money to get processed. We'd get that processed film back. We'd also record our sound on a separate system, and we would record that audio over to this like magnetic film sound strip. I don't even know what the stuff was made of, but it was something with magnets.
How do they work?
And we would have this big giant editing system that was like a projector. It was actually called a Steenbeck, and you would put your roll of film on one side and you'd have it on a reel, and then you could have multiple reels going so that you could swap, and this is how you'd like watch the footage and you'd see where you need to cut, and you had to synchronize your sound and your audio together because they were separate tracks, and so you'd like mark it with like an X using a wax pencil. And you would use this like guillotine splicer, like where if you had an edit, you would have to like slice it with the guillotine slicer and cut the film. And then you take a piece of tape and you'd like slap that down, and then like using the splicer, like connect the two pieces of film and splice them together with the tape. And it was always important to double splice your film, so you do it on both sides so it wouldn't come off in a projector. But at the exact same time, there was another rising technology in the form of non-linear video editing systems. There were things like the Media 100, there was the Avid. Adobe Premiere was a program that I still use today, but I actually used I think the very first version of it when I was a teenager, still back in high school. And that was like this revolutionary thing where you could have desktop editing, where you could like just have a regular computer and like edit videos. Now, the quality of the videos that were coming off of these digital systems was absolute garbage. You could have a system that was like broadcast quality, but they were gigantic. They'd have these massive storage drives, and they had these crazy price tags. Like, I don't know, like I think an Avid back in the day cost like, I don't know, $120,000 is a number that sticks out in my mind. And so it was completely inaccessible. And yeah, you had things like Adobe Premiere out there and like, starting to get a little bit of traction, but it still wasn't, super useful for doing professional work. And most of the people inside my film school were like laughing at the digital stuff and saying, no, film will always be here. Like I actually distinctly remember this one professor I had who taught the like introductory film course, and he was saying that digital video would never ever replace film because digital video would never be able to create the image resolution that would match chemical film processing. And I mean, to see what would happen over the next 10 years after that professor was making those comments in that class in Boston, Massachusetts, it's pretty amazing to see how quickly things changed. And now I share all these long-winded ramblings of a middle-aged man with you to say that it's amazing how a new technology can drastically change things. Because whereas when I was 18 and I would sit in the basement of the school editing films and make one film that would probably cost me $3,000 in film stock and processing costs, and it would take me, I don't know, 300 hours to edit, and it turned out to be a 5-minute film that would end up playing at my school's film festival and be seen by like, I don't know, 200 people. Like, that was a big accomplishment for me. And meanwhile, just this morning on my phone, I was able to edit a video that was probably 10 times the quality, and I shot it entirely on my phone and I edited it on my phone, and it was viewed by, I don't know, 100,000 people in a couple of hours. And the reality of what I used to do in film school was really only about 20 years ago. And so now as we think about the landscape of artificial intelligence and the leaps and bounds that things have made, I think that anybody who is neglecting the idea that things are going to evolve and progress very, very quickly is completely blind to the truth and the reality of the situation. And for the folks who are just going to shout it down and say it's awful, it doesn't look good, it's never going to replace people,
you can't draw freaking hands, man.
I think you're grossly mistaken. And if you look at situations of even relative similarity, you're going to see that there's a very specific pattern that repeats over and over and over again.
Major technology developments have always changed the world of art.
The advent of photography and how photography shifted the landscape of art, I think that's an example. I think if you even just look at computers, right, and the way that the use of the computer has completely shifted the art world, I mean, how can you not see where the puck is going when it comes to artificial intelligence?
One more Neutrogena tantrum out of you and you're getting the gate, bud.
I mean, a lot of the artwork that I've created for this very video is stuff that I drew on my iPad, and I never actually picked up a physical pencil or an ink or a brush. I've been using just this plastic stylus on top of a piece of glass, and that is actually creating art. Now, if I were to tell somebody that this is how I create art 30 years ago, they would have laughed at me. They would have thought I was insane.
It's a very interesting story, future boy.
And they would have said, oh, you're using computers. That's not really art.
Computers are useless. They can only give you answers.
When I hear a lot of the criticism thrown on folks who are using AI in their art and in their content creation, I feel like I see so many parallels. And the truth of the matter is, so much of it's actually rooted very much in a personal insecurity.
They took our jobs!
Yeah, they're down! Took our jobs!
By the time I graduated college, it was in the midst of the dot-com bust and nobody was really hiring, and the only job that I could really get was working in corporate video production, doing things like sexual harassment training videos.
Does an old man's heart good just to be working around such pretty young things all day? Keeps the juices flowing, if you know what I mean.
Yes, Walt, we know.
Because the job that I got was actually at like sort of like a mid-sized production house who was doing like a lot of like commercial and corporate work. When I looked at the equipment that they had like all these large beta cams, and they had like large Avid style editing systems, and the amount of money that they charged their clients really helped pay for the equipment, helped ensure that they could have a good living, helped ensure I could have a good living. But what I noticed after working there for a couple of years, the competition was getting fiercer and fiercer, and more the folks that we were bidding against for various projects were starting to be very, very small, very, very simple shops, where instead of having like a big camera rig and a whole giant nonlinear editing setup, it was just basically a person with a DV cam and a Power Mac and a copy of Final Cut Pro. And when you started to see that the barrier of entry to be working in the corporate video space was getting lower and lower and lower, here I was in my my early 20s at just the start of my career, and I had gone to college and I had training and I'd started to build up professional experience, and just seeing how low in the matter of a couple of years the barrier to entry had gotten and what that did for the pricing of those services. For me personally, that was a massive wake-up call, and by the time I was 25, I went searching elsewhere for a different type of career. You know, the disruption of an industry really does force people to reevaluate their career path and the trajectory they've been on and how they earned a living. And when I compare what I personally experienced back in the early 2000s and I compare it to what digital artists are experiencing right now, my heart goes out to them. But the fact of the matter is, and I spent all night actually trying to brainstorm a list of this, I cannot think of a single industry where a technology innovation came along and disrupted that industry, and everybody collectively said, no, we're not going to use that technology. We need to protect people's jobs.
The only two examples that are even in the same zip code would be the situation with the Luddites in the early 19th century England and their protests related to weaving machinery. Or if you look at the banking industry of the 1960s and 1970s, when unions and employees were very, very concerned about the rise of automated teller machines. While both circumstances led to short-term changes, over the long haul, technology always seems to win out, regardless if it's just or unjust.
And if I look at what's happened, say, in the last year with the writer's strike and the Screen Actors Guild strike, and while those agreements are going to slow the adoption within Hollywood, it is not going to stop a gosh darn thing. The way humans are wired and our self-interest and greed are going to prevent something like that from happening. And that's not meant to be a values or judgment statement here. It's just an observation of human nature. Just like we will all inevitably age and die, at an aggregate scale, humans will act in their best interest, and there's enough folks out there with a vested interest who are going to want to use artificial intelligence that it will be impossible to stop that inevitable onslaught.
This system exploits artists, it's unethical, and I don't want to be a part of it.
I hear so much of the anxiety from folks about how artists will lose their jobs and their ability to earn a livelihood because of what artificial intelligence is going to do. They're not wrong. The way many folks have been earning their living over the last, 20 years or so is going to drastically shift yet again. When I was a teenager, I knew a guy who earned his living as a graphic artist. He basically would do drawings and layouts for small businesses in the local area, for advertisements in the newspaper or in the phone book or that sort of thing. Like, that's how this guy earned his living, and it was a pretty solid living that he earned, and that's what he did. So much of what they were doing is not work that exists today. If I think about small businesses in this day and age, they're often doing most of their marketing materials themselves by using something like Canva. That right there is an example of technology putting people out of work. And so while what they were doing was a great way to earn a living in the 90s, it's a horrible way to earn a living in the 2020s. And just as that has changed, I imagine that the way people are going to earn their living through art in the 2030s is going to be drastically different too. You know, the irony is, despite the fact that jobs like the ones that my friend had are no longer a thing,
jobs like the one that I personally do today were not a thing back then. And this is the part of the video where I have to uncomfortably acknowledge that I'm one of those people who has a vested interest in the ability to use artificial intelligence. Right now, as a person who creates content on the internet as a way to pay my regular bills, being able to use artificial intelligence tools to create more content, better content, and faster content, that's all in my personal best interest. There's no escaping it and no denying it. And so as you're hearing this entire long-winded defense of artificial intelligence tools, don't forget that fact. Much like most of the folks who are criticizing the use of artificial intelligence have a vested interest in protecting the current model of creation, folks like me have a vested interest in things going the other way. But the reality is, if I zoom back even further, I know it's only a year, maybe 2 years tops, where my TikTok count or my YouTube channel is going to be having to compete head to head on a daily basis with videos and channels that are created almost entirely by artificial intelligence. That terrifies me, but I'm also not going to deny the fact that it is an inevitability.
I am inevitable.
Hey guys, Bubblegum AI here. In the last video, I reacted to Slogo reacting to me. And in the intro, I also mentioned that I'll be reacting to Penguin.
Now, I think it's also important to note that a defense of this technology is not meant to be a defense of misuse of this technology. That includes actions like forgery or impersonation, deepfakes being used for misinformation or non-consensual porn, or misrepresenting somebody or their views, outputted artwork that violates copyright protections or trademarks or other things like that. Whether somebody's using traditional means or artificial intelligence to do activities like that, it's always wrong. But I believe it's okay to use chainsaws even if you're opposed to the actions of Leatherface.
You know, when I think about the film world or the television world or just the art world of, like, say 30 or 40 years ago versus what it looks like today, I think the democratization of creation is the biggest shift that I see. The ability to share, the ability to be recognized, the ability to earn a living, like that was something that didn't exist back then that is open to virtually anyone. Anybody out there can be a filmmaker when it comes to just using their phone and throwing up a video on YouTube or TikTok or wherever. If you want to be a painter or if you want to draw, you can easily find work all across the world, and I think it's been a good thing. I see the use of AI tools as a form of democratization of creation, opening up creation to a whole new set of folks. And for people who are out there saying, well, you know, they haven't earned those skills, they haven't earned that ability, I think you're missing to say, what's the magic, what's the true secret sauce, and what's special about the creation of art? Is it actually just the technical skills, or is it the ideas or the concepts? And I don't know, I guess just to steal a phrase from art criticism of the past, the aura of it all, how it all kind of comes together, mise en scene, like all of that, I think is a big part of what makes art art. And to just rely on the technical skills and say that that's what makes somebody an artist, I think it misses the point. I think actually having an idea, having something to say, having something that you want to bring to life, that's what makes the art. That's what makes the artist.
A man must have a code. Oh, no doubt.
I think another challenging part of the great AI debate is where to draw the line. Like, if we collectively come to the conclusion that a platform like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney is unethical and wrong, okay, I kind of see the argument and I get it. And even though I think it's unlikely, if that became the widely held belief, I probably wouldn't use those things. But these days, if you look around, similar types of technology are all over the place. A lot of the same models that were used in the creation of things like Stable Diffusion are also being used in the development of self-driving cars. I mean, for example, if I look at like this camera that I have here, right? It's got facial recognition technology, and so I can actually make the camera focus on and track with my face without me having to do anything. How do you think this camera learned to recognize what a human face looks like? When I'm making thumbnails for my videos and I take a picture, say with my phone, and I use that picture and I put it into Photoshop, and I realize that the picture that I took with my camera isn't the same size as what I need for the thumbnail, how can I fix that problem? These days, Photoshop has a tool built in called generative fill, where I just highlight a portion, select it, click generate, and within the span of, I don't know, 15, 30 seconds, it'll create an entirely false image and create a fake continuation of whatever photo you've got. Like in the olden days of, say, 12 months ago, I could have done the same thing, but it probably would have taken me an hour of copying and pasting and using the cloning tool to create the stretch and continuation of that image. Now it's just a matter of a click of a button.
Is something like that not okay?
AI-assisted tools are absolutely everywhere when I look at what it's like to create these days. Whether it's inside your camera, or something to help you with the drudgery of mundane Photoshop work, or using transcription tools to speed up the editing process, all of these things really do help live up to the promise of AI helping eliminate mundane tasks and give us a chance to create more. I just think the question is, Where is the line drawn? What forms of helping are okay versus what forms of helping are not? For example, I'll spend hours searching stock image libraries looking for an image to bring an idea to life, where I could easily shortcut that process and arguably get a better result by hopping into Midjourney and spending 15 minutes of dropping some prompts and getting the exact image that I have inside my brain.
Oh, I think we're gonna be sick.
I know with this video, I'm probably giving you guys more questions than answers, but I feel like having a good faith discussion about these things is where we all need to collectively be at. And I feel like if I look at both sides of the debate right now, whether it's for using AI in art or against it, there's a lot of accusations, there's a lot of finger pointing. This is an extremely complicated, extremely nuanced, and extremely sensitive topic, and it needs to be handled with care. And I know as a society, we are becoming worse and worse at handling those nuanced conversations. But if there's been ever a time that we need to be able to do it, now is the time. I mean, if there's folks out there who would love to have a conversation with me about it and tell me why I'm wrong, I really do want to listen and I really want to hear. I'm sure I'm going to hear a lot of it in the comments of this video. And so, yeah, I guess that's my take. Thank you for at least listening and hearing me out.